He crosswalked
You
that broken
cannot
king.
protect them
The
forever.
Vampire
I
King
will
did
not
not
let you
stop for
take them.
traffic.
Your light
Traffic
is
stopped for
fading.
him. Yet that night, as the black luxury sedan idled at a red light, surrounded by honking cars and neon reflections, he found himself trapped like any ordinary man, forced to wait. The city hummed around him, alive and careless.
Please help us!
Rain misted the windshield,
I beg you, they're
blurring
coming!
the world
Don't
beyond the
turn
tinted
away!
glass. Inside the car, everything was quiet, perfect, cold. Beside him sat his fiancée, elegant, composed, speaking softly about council expectations and ceremonial arrangements. Her voice flowed smoothly, without emotion, without warmth. She was everything the Vampire Council approved of, and nothing his heart responded to. He nodded when expected. He gave brief acknowledgments. He had perfected this performance over centuries, appearing present while feeling nothing. Then the world outside the car shifted. A woman stepped off the curb. She moved carefully, cautiously, as if the ground itself could betray her. Her coat was thin for the season, her shoulders tense beneath its worn fabric. Strapped tightly against her chest were two infants, bundled close, their small heads resting beneath her chin. The Vampire King's body locked. He didn't need to breathe, but something in his chest constricted as if air had been stolen from him. He knew that walk. The way she held herself, fragile but unyielding. The way she leaned forward slightly, shielding the babies from the cold wind. The quiet determination etched into her posture. The woman he had walked away from. The woman he had loved, and abandoned. The light remained red. Time slowed. Through vampire-sharp vision, he saw details no human could. The exhaustion shadowing her eyes, the frayed edge of her sleeve, the faint tremble in her arms as she adjusted the baby's weight. One of the infants stirred. And when the baby opened its eyes, the Vampire King saw it. Silver blue. His bloodline's unmistakable mark. The realization struck like a blade through his immortal calm. The math was merciless. The car moved forward as the light turned green, pulling him away from the crosswalk, but not from the truth. She disappeared into the crowd, taking his children with her. And in that moment, the Vampire King's perfectly controlled world cracked. That night, his penthouse felt like a mausoleum. Cold marble floors. Steel and glass. Walls designed to impress beings who valued power over warmth. Nothing personal. Nothing alive. He stood alone in the darkness long after his fiancée had left, staring out over the city he ruled but did not belong to. For centuries he had ruled with discipline. Emotion was weakness. Attachment was liability. That was what his father taught him. And so, when he had loved a human woman, poor, kind, vulnerable, he had done what he believed was noble. He left. He told himself she deserved safety, normalcy, a life untouched by monsters. Now he knew the truth. She had not needed protection from him. She had needed him. And instead she had been surviving alone. The address came before dawn. A quiet street. A modest building. The kind of place people passed without looking twice. He stood across the street as night faded, hidden beneath a hood, watching the building like a sinner outside a church. When she finally emerged, pushing a worn double stroller, his chest tightened again. She struggled with the door. No one helped. One baby cried. She soothed it without complaint, murmuring softly as if apology lived in every word. She was thinner than he remembered. Tired in a way no sleep could fix. This was not weakness. This was endurance. And he had abandoned it. He returned after sunset. When she opened the door, there was no shock in her eyes. Only recognition. She did not smile. She did not cry. She simply stepped aside and let him in. Inside, the apartment was small, but alive. Two bassinets glowed softly in the corner. The air smelled of warmth and care. The space carried exhaustion, sacrifice, and love. He asked the question that shattered them both. And she answered without anger. Without accusation. She had raised his children alone because he had chosen duty over love. And now, standing in that fragile sanctuary, the Vampire King understood something terrifying. Power had never made him strong. Love was. And he had almost lost it forever. The weight she never shared. Morning came too fast. The woman barely slept. The twins woke in turns, crying softly, as if even their hunger knew it had to be quiet. She rose each time without complaint, lifting them gently, rocking them close to her chest while the city outside began another careless day. By sunrise she was already exhausted. She strapped the twins into their worn stroller and stepped outside, pulling her thin coat tighter against the cold. The building behind her looked tired, just like her. Peeling paint. Flickering lights. A place meant for survival, not comfort. She had appointments today, shelter paperwork, food assistance. Another interview that would probably end the same way the others had. The moment employers saw the stroller, their eyes changed. She had learned to recognize that look. Polite disappointment. Hidden judgment. Across the street, unseen, the Vampire King watched. He had not slept either. He followed at a distance, careful not to be noticed. Every instinct in him screamed to step forward, to take the stroller, to carry the weight she had borne alone for months. But fear held him back. Fear that she would reject him. Fear that his presence would complicate the fragile life she had built without him. So he watched. The first rejection came at a cafe. The manager smiled until she noticed the twins. "We're not really set up for distractions," the woman said softly, as if kindness could hide cruelty. The girl nodded. She always nodded. She thanked her anyway. The second rejection was sharper. "You should focus on your kids," the man said, eyes already drifting away. "This isn't the place for you. Not someone like you," but it felt the same. The Vampire King's jaw tightened. Centuries of control strained under something hot and unfamiliar. Anger. At the shelter office, the line stretched endlessly. When her turn finally came, the clerk barely looked up. "Paperwork incomplete," she explained quietly. She always explained quietly. The clerk sighed, annoyed. "Rules are rules." One twin started crying. Then the other. The room turned. Eyes landed on her, not with help but irritation. She gathered her babies closer, whispering apologies that broke the Vampire King's heart. Apologies for existing. That night, rain soaked the city. She struggled with the stroller again, hands numb, shoes worn thin. A passing stranger brushed her shoulder hard enough to stagger her. "Watch it," he muttered. She said nothing. She never did. From the shadows, the Vampire King finally moved. The streetlights flickered as he stepped closer, his presence bending the air itself. The rain never touched him. The man who had shoved her froze, suddenly pale. "Apologize," the Vampire King said calmly. The word carried power. The man swallowed. I'm sorry." The Vampire King turned back to her. She stared at him, startled, confused, guarded. "I didn't need," she began. "I know," he said gently. That was all. He did not touch her. Did not push. Did not demand forgiveness. He simply walked beside her, shielding her from the rain until they reached her building. For the first time in months, she wasn't alone on the walk home. Inside her apartment, silence filled the space. The twins slept. She stood near the door, arms folded tightly like armor. "Why are you here?" she asked. The Vampire King met her eyes. "Because I was wrong," he said. "No excuses. No titles. No power. Just truth." She didn't answer. But she didn't ask him to leave either. And for a king who ruled the night, that quiet permission meant everything. When the world tried to break her, the trouble came in daylight. It always did. She stood in line at the assistant's office again, the twins bundled close, their breathing soft against her chest. She had learned not to hope too much. Hope made disappointment sharper. A woman behind her sighed loudly. "Some people really shouldn't have kids if they can't afford them." The words were not whispered. They were meant to land. Her shoulders stiffened, but she said nothing. She never did. Silence had become her shield. The Vampire King stood across the street, unseen, listening. His hands curled slowly at his sides. Centuries of restraint warred with something raw and violent inside him. He had ruled wars without blinking. This was harder. When it was finally her turn, the clerk barely glanced at her paperwork. "You again?" Her voice was sharp, tired, bored of compassion. The girl explained, calmly, respectfully, that she had submitted everything requested. The clerk scoffed. "You expect special treatment because you brought your kids?" The room went quiet. The twins stirred. Her face flushed, not with anger but shame. "I'm not asking for special treatment," she said softly. "I just need help." Laughter rippled from somewhere behind her. The clerk leaned back, crossing her arms. "Maybe you should have made better choices." That was when the Vampire King stepped forward. The air changed. Lights flickered. Every instinct in the room screamed danger, though no one could explain why. The clerk looked up and froze. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten. He simply spoke. "Repeat what you just said." The words were calm. Absolute. The clerk swallowed. "Sir, You are employed to serve," he continued evenly. "Not to judge. Not to humiliate. Not to decide who deserves dignity." The room held its breath. He turned slightly, positioning himself between the girl and the counter. Subtle, protective. "Process her request. Now." The clerk's hands shook as she reached for the paperwork. No one laughed anymore. Outside, the girl stared at him in disbelief. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he replied. That answer unsettled her more than any display of power. "Then why did you?" He looked at her carefully. "Because no one should be punished for surviving." She had no response. Her eyes burned, but she refused to cry. Word spread quickly. The Vampire Council did not approve of public scenes. That night, he stood before them, cold marble, ancient eyes watching. "You're exposing yourself," one elder warned. "You're weakening your position." He did not bow. "She is under my protection," he said. Murmurs erupted. "A human?" another scoffed. He met their gaze without flinching. "My children are human." Silence fell like a blade. Back at the apartment, the girl rocked the twins to sleep, her thoughts restless. She had spent her life invisible. Now the most powerful being she knew stood between her and the world. It terrified her. And comforted her. When a knock came at the door, her heart leapt. It was him. No guards. No arrogance. Just a man standing uncertainly in her doorway. "I brought food," he said. She hesitated, then stepped aside. That night they ate quietly. Not as king and subject. Not as savior and saved. But as two people bound by something fragile and dangerous. Hope. The strength she never knew she had. The warning came quietly. Too quietly. The Vampire King felt it before he saw it. The shift in the night, the subtle pressure in the air that meant the world was paying attention again. Power always attracted predators. And now she was in their sight. He stood on the rooftop of his tower, the city stretched beneath him like a living map. Somewhere within that maze of streets, she slept beside their children, unaware of how fragile her safety truly was. For the first time in centuries, fear touched him. Not for himself. For her. The next morning she sensed something was wrong. The city felt heavier. Strangers lingered too long. A black car idled near her building, engine humming softly, never leaving. She tried to ignore it. Survival had taught her that fear wasted energy. She focused on the twins, feeding them, soothing them, whispering soft promises that tomorrow would be kinder. But when a letter slipped beneath her door, her hands trembled. No name. No signature. Just a single line. "Leave the city. He cannot protect you forever." Her breath caught. She read it twice. 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and placed it in the trash. She had been threatened before, by hunger, by cold, by indifference. This was nothing new. But when the Vampire King arrived that evening and saw the tension in her posture, he knew. She handed him the letter without a word. His eyes darkened. "They've crossed a line," he said quietly. She shook her head. "I won't run." The words surprised them both. That night, danger came openly. A confrontation in the alley. Shadows that moved wrong. Voices that carried ancient malice. The Vampire King stood between her and the darkness, power rippling outward, warning the world itself to step back. But she did something unexpected. She stepped beside him. Not behind. "I won't be hidden," she said, voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "I won't be erased." The night listened. And something answered. Pulse, not his. Hers. The air shimmered, reacting to her presence like recognizing an old truth. The shadows recoiled. The Vampire King turned slowly, staring at her with something close to awe. "You feel it," he said. She swallowed. "I don't understand it. But I've always felt different. Stronger when it mattered." For the first time he saw her not as fragile, but as formidable. The council summoned him at dawn. "This ends now," an elder hissed. "Your weakness is destabilizing the realm." He stood tall. "She is not my weakness." They laughed. Until the floor beneath them trembled. Until ancient wards flickered. "She is bound to this world more deeply than you know," he continued. "And if you touch her, or my children, you will learn what real ruin looks like." Silence fell. They saw it then. Not love. Loyalty. And that terrified them. Back at the apartment, she waited. When he returned, she didn't ask questions. She simply said, "I'm tired of being afraid." He knelt before her, not as a king but as a man. "So am I," he admitted. Their eyes met. No promises. No declarations. Just truth. Outside, the city moved on, unaware that something ancient had shifted. Because the girl the world had dismissed was no longer alone. And the king who had ruled without heart had finally found something worth protecting, at any cost. The queen the world refused to see. The city woke to tension it could not name. Something ancient stirred beneath the streets, something the Vampire Council had hoped never to face again. Power did not always announce itself with thunder. Sometimes, it rose quietly, through resolve, through love, through a human heart that refused to break. The Vampire King stood at the edge of the council chamber, his posture calm, his presence absolute. Across the room the elders whispered, their confidence already cracking. They had ruled through fear for centuries, believing power was inherited, hoarded, controlled. They had underestimated something far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose. She arrived without ceremony. No crown. No guards. No borrowed strength. Just a mother carrying her children. The council scoffed when she entered, her worn coat brushing against ancient stone. They saw poverty. Fragility. A human who had survived where she should not have. They did not see destiny. The twins stirred in her arms, their silver-blue eyes glowing faintly under the chamber lights. The room fell silent. Blood recognized blood. She does not belong here, one elder snapped. The Vampire King stepped forward, but she raised her hand. I do, she said quietly. Her voice carried. Not loudly. Not forcefully. Truth carried farther than power ever had. She spoke of hunger. Of cold nights. Of humiliation endured in silence. Of raising children alone while the world judged her worth by what she lacked. And still, she said, eyes steady, I chose kindness. I chose not to become cruel just because cruelty was easier. The chamber trembled, not from magic but from shame. You call yourselves rulers, she continued, but you rule through fear. You abandoned your own future because it didn't look the way you expected. The elders recoiled. The Vampire King watched her with reverence. This was not protection anymore. This was partnership. The truth revealed itself then. Her bloodline was older than theirs. A forgotten lineage, human once, chosen by ancient forces to bridge worlds. Not to rule through dominance but through balance. The twins were proof. The future. The council tried to strike first. They failed. Power surged, not from the Vampire King but from her. The chamber lights shattered. Wards collapsed. Ancient magic bowed to something purer. Justice. The elders fell, not dead but exposed. Stripped of authority. Stripped of lies. Instant karma delivered. After, the city felt lighter. Change always did that. The Vampire King knelt before her, not in submission but in respect. I once believed love was weakness, he said. I was wrong. She smiled softly. I once believed I was powerless, she replied. I was wrong too. They stood together, not king and subject, not savior and saved, but equals. They did not build a palace. They built a home. Warm, open, alive. The twins grew surrounded by laughter instead of silence. The city learned new laws, ones that valued compassion as much as strength. And the story spread. Of a woman the world ignored. Of a king who learned to listen. Of a truth too powerful to suppress. Never judge worth by status. Never mistake kindness for weakness. And never underestimate the strength of someone who survives with love intact.